Dad decided not to get an Icon Pass this year. Instead, we're making home movies in the garage.
Cut!
But every movie he makes is about skiing. Why didn't you just get the Icon Pass?
Why do you keep bringing that up?
To be honest, I'm a little worried about him.
Welcome to Outdoor Retailer Winter Online. We're glad you're here. Today is our kickoff to providing you more than 2 months to network, see new products, and learn. You can log in and connect with each other at any point between now and March 19th. So take advantage of the time to explore what's here. Don't worry if you missed something. All education sessions will be available on demand. This is all becoming second nature now. We're moving around in the digital space with ease. At the same time, this past year has demonstrated how much everyone needs the outdoors. Nature has provided comfort and an escape. It's been our medicine. We've all witnessed the surge in participation. More people are out enjoying trails and lakes and campgrounds. Plus, they're buying the products to help them get there, from bikes to boats and now backcountry. We have an incredible opportunity to embrace the newcomers and experts alike. And outdoor recreation has helped fuel economies through these tough times. In the past year, we have all been challenged like never before. Each day is unpredictable, and the pandemic truly devastating. Yet amidst the setbacks, we've risen above. We've found ways to change behaviors and business models. We've developed innovative solutions to keep pushing forward. And to maintain this progress, we must stay connected. We all know the value of engaging in person, whether it's between staff and design teams, with reps and agencies, or with athletes and customers. These day-to-day interactions mean so much to us right now. But right now, we're staying connected here in this virtual space. And by doing so, you're continuing to build relationships and support each other. You're sharing resources and inspiration. We're not making the progress by going it alone. There's incredible power in the collective. When we come together, we can affect change. We can take meaningful action to address the climate crisis. We can foster participation. And together, we break down barriers. As a united community, we must champion equality and make structural changes to let the diversity flourish. So use the weeks ahead to reach out to one another, share ideas and success stories, nurture relationships, and start new ones. Take time to learn and grow. Wherever you are joining us from, remember, you have this incredible community supporting you. We look forward to connecting with you throughout Winter Online. Now, I'd like to welcome Outdoor Industry Association Executive Director, Lisa Angenbrug.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Angenbrug, Executive Director of the Outdoor Industry Association, and I learned to ski in jeans. I know for many in this audience, skiing in jeans is a joke or a sign of someone who's not really a skier. I was 12, new to skiing, and did not feel particularly welcome on the slopes. I was made to feel less than because my parents had no idea what was appropriate or cool. Thankfully, the group ski instructor was welcoming, and he waited until the end of the day to pull my father aside, away from everyone else, and tell him why jeans and a puffy army surplus coat were not the best. It didn't get a lot better when my mom sewed a ski outfit for me from a kit. But I liked to be outside and I kept skiing, and I eventually had the gear, but I never forgot what it was like to not feel welcome. I think about this a lot, seeing all the new outdoor participants. So many people are discovering or rediscovering the outdoors. Early data on sales of outdoor equipment, the number of new users, the number of times people per week are finding joy outdoors are all up, often by double or triple digits. As outdoor enthusiasts and an outdoor industry, we are at a critical moment. Our industry has an opportunity to be inclusive. We have a moment now where getting outside is a priority for many more people than it's been in the past. But will that stick? Are we doing everything we can to make everyone feel included and want to keep getting outside? Are we sharing not just the joy and freedom, but also how to be safe outside and making sure people feel safe? Are we doing enough to protect the outdoor places we do have? Or enough to make sure climate change doesn't harm our businesses, our customers, and our communities? Or enough to advocate for more places to share with new participants and create an outdoors for all? Throughout the next several weeks of the show, OIA's virtual education sessions will focus on the policy and advocacy work we do on behalf of our members. Policies that create thriving businesses, more people thriving outside, and a thriving planet. There is a lot to do, and it will all be done better through action around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors. We hope these sessions will expand the narrative by featuring diverse voices and perspectives. We want everyone listening to think about how you, through your job, your time outside, your role in the community, or your company, can foster a greater sense of inclusion. It is now my pleasure to introduce a true champion of the outdoors, the outdoor industry, and making the outdoors for all, Colorado Governor Jared Polis.
I'm Colorado Governor Jared Polis. Thank you for having me here today to kick off Outdoor Retailer Winter Online 2021. Thank you to the Outdoor Industry Association, Outdoor Retailer, and Snow Sports Industries of America for hosting this virtual event. It's unfortunate we can't meet in person. Colorado expects to be one of the very first states to host large conventions in the near future. And I've had the pleasure of attending several of the past outdoor retailers events at the Colorado Convention Center. I know the energy, I know the vibrance that this industry convening brings to Colorado, to the nation, and I'm excited to join you in person soon. While we can't gather in person today, we can still connect on the issues that matter the most. It's important that we move forward together as we recover from COVID-19 and see the outdoors as really the saving grace in the American West. We were one of the states that kept our state park system open throughout the entire pandemic and really encouraged people to get out and explore the great outdoors. And outdoor recreation is critical for our state's recovery, economically, as well as for the health of Coloradans. Well, not without challenges over the summer. As people sought safe ways to get out, we saw record-breaking patronage of parks, public land. It helped buffer many local communities from even worse drops in local revenue. Each year, Americans explore the outdoors in so many ways. Hiking, camping, climbing, hunting, fishing, birding, canoeing, kayaking, you name it, snowboarding, scuba diving, surfing. Those are just a few. Outdoor recreation offers so many benefits to our health and wellness, youth and community and families, environment, social justice, and more. Americans' passion for our great outdoors also supports the outdoor recreation economy. $788 billion. Consumer spending, over 5 million jobs. Here in Colorado, outdoor recreation is about 10% of our state's GDP, supports 511,000 jobs. So not surprisingly, snow activities ranked number one among the state's outdoors recreation categories, $1.7 billion in 2019. But like every sector across the economy, of course, the outdoor industry has been impacted by COVID-19. But I also think that the outdoor recreation industry is extremely well positioned to grow and drive economic recovery and sustained long-term growth. Together, the outdoor suppliers, manufacturers, retailers who make outdoor products, 50 million current and future voters whose lives are enriched by outdoor recreation, represent a shared vision and purpose. They can get the American economy back on track. And I'm glad the industry is collaborating to tackle three important policy issues: combating the climate crisis, equitable access to public lands and waters, and they call it balanced trade. I just say free, it's free trade. We want free trade. Climate change is already causing disruption and financial harm to outdoor businesses and to the local, state, and national economies that rely on this industry's job creation and tax revenue. The outdoor recreation economy also depends on abundant, safe, and welcoming public lands and waters. The health of individuals, communities, and our economies is tied to opportunities for everyone to experience our parks, our trails, our amazing outdoor spaces. And a stable and predictable federal trade policy that opens markets, encourages imports and exports, reduces barriers and tariffs, will create U.S. jobs, benefit consumers, and fuel global innovation. I stand with the outdoor industry, along with millions of outdoor enthusiasts, our families among them, and I'm ready to do my part to support meaningful action on all of these issues.
Welcome to the virtual show. While I look forward to when we can all be together again, this is a great second best. I think we can honestly say this is a year like none other. COVID has been a blessing and a curse. It has accelerated our weaknesses and better defined our strengths and opportunities. While there is no doubt we will unfortunately experience casualties and loss, we have the opportunity to move away from our comfort zone and to create a better vision for the future. In order to move this industry forward, there are 4 key areas that need our collective attention: business innovation, climate, consumers, and inclusion. COVID has forced us all to examine our businesses and make changes. The new normal is the new way of doing business. This is a huge opportunity to adapt and innovate our businesses to meet the changing landscape. SIA provides the tools and resources to help in this transition. Climate is the greatest existential threat we all face. We depend on snow for the future of our industry, and it's our job to protect it. SIA has created Climate United in order to provide our members with the roadmap, guidance, and resources to effectively address climate change as part of their membership. The future of our industries lies with the consumer. Whether you are a retailer, supplier, resort, or rep, we all need to better understand the journey of the winter outdoor consumer. SIA has invested in consumer data and consumer expos in effort to provide our members with direct opportunities for consumer engagement. We have an obligation to make this industry more inclusive. For the first time, non-whites and Hispanics were a majority of people under age 16 in 2019. We are looking at our future participants and yet not speaking to them. If we're going to succeed and thrive as an industry, we must embed inclusion in everything we do and forge authentic and meaningful relationships with a new generation of winter outdoor enthusiasts. Innovation, climate, consumers, and inclusion are all areas critical for our long-term success. COVID has opened our eyes to how vulnerable we can be if we don't foster a more resilient and forward-thinking perspective. SIA is providing the tools and information to help transform their business and the industry to be more resilient. But it's going to take all of us working together to effect real change as a community. And with that, I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Lindsay Peoples Wagner. Lindsay is the only Black female editor-in-chief in the United States and a 2020 Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree. Lindsay shares an invaluable view of women's empowerment, marketing to Gen Z, elevating your brand in the era of Black Lives Matter, hiring for diversity, and running the multi-million-dollar brand of Teen Vogue with an editorial mission to view everything through the lens of inclusivity. Lindsay is a powerful voice for diversity and inclusion in the predominantly white fashion industry. She is a co-founder of the Black in Fashion Council. The council has enlisted the support of the Human Rights Campaign to provide benchmarking around corporate policies and practices that are pertinent to the inclusivity of Black employees. In addition, the council has established a quality index score for companies across fashion and beauty brands and the media that covers them. Please join me in welcoming Lindsay Peoples Wagner.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Peoples Wagner. I am the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue and the co-founder of the Black in Fashion Council. Thank you so much for having me, and super honored to be able to talk with you today about all things inclusivity. I wanted to start out with a lot of the images that I have worked a lot of time and spent a lot of time on at Teen Vogue, because I think that identifying the brand image and making sure that inclusivity is at the forefront of everything that you do has been really fundamental to me as a human being and to my profession as well. But I think even if you don't work specifically in the fashion and beauty industry, there's so many ways that inclusivity can, really be made sure that it's part of your business plan holistically, and really just, making sure the priority of people of color feeling like they're seen and heard in the workplace and that their voices are amplified. So I'm super excited to talk with you guys today about all the different things I've been doing at Teen Vogue and Black in Fashion Council. So I wanted to start out first with really just talking about, I think, how I have formed a lot of my ideology around inclusivity. And I think really identifying the differences between diversity and inclusivity has been fundamental to, I think, actually seeing the needle change and move in the industries. And this quote is a favorite of mine because I think that it really is indicative of a lot of the work that I've done. And I think how inclusivity really has to be part of everything that you do. Too often I've seen at companies that inclusivity really is only part of HR, and that's really where that sits, or it really only comes up if there's issues. Whereas I think a lot of these conversations really just need to be normalized. And I think that when we talk about having a seat at the table and having all these opportunities, it's really more than just having that seat at the table. It's being put in a position of success to be able to make all these changes. And that's really what my work has been about. A lot of this has really started for me of seeing that appropriation and diversity conversations needed to be amplified in a new way. And so here on the left, you'll see, there was a picture from Dapper Dan, and he, had this amazing collection in Harlem, and he's just the most amazing designer. And then Gucci a couple years ago, used that as a reference in their collection, but then didn't give him credit. We all know that to be appropriation now, but I think that appropriation really is just giving credit to where it's due, which seems like it could be easy enough. But I do think that a lot of times marginalized communities, and specifically people of color, have felt like they aren't getting the credit that they deserve. They aren't, getting the positions that they deserve. But then, there's a Black model on the runway, or it's this trend that's on the runway that is indicative of our culture, right? And so I think a lot of these conversations really started a movement of sorts of really saying, we need to actually do better about inclusivity, and not just, we've found this picture. We need to be better about, let's give this Black designer credit. Let's, include him into our business plans. And so Dapper Dan and Gucci is a really good example, because he's someone that is now part of the Gucci family. He has his own collections and he has his own parts of the store. And they decided to really actually make him part of the fabric of the brand, instead of this is just that one thing that we're trying to check a box, which too often I think with so many companies, it has been strategy around, well, what are the boxes that we need to check to make sure that we don't get called out or that we don't get canceled, instead of how do we just make this part of everything that we're doing. And on the right is another example from Prada that came up of just not really understanding the notions around, what is appropriate, what is offensive to certain cultures. Obviously, that kind of image is very offensive to Black people and its references to slavery. But I think that a lot of it is, making sure that we take as much time and care in learning everyone else's history and things that are offensive, those different microaggressions, and how we can show up better in the workplace. And these are just two examples that were, covered in the news a ton, and I think started a lot of the traction and movements, I think, of, how do we have these conversations in the workplace on a regular basis. So I also think one thing that has really sustained this work, and I think made me really, really realize, I think, why inclusivity needed to really be pushed and pressed onto people, and it wasn't just something that people are going to naturally do, is because I remember, I'm from the Midwest, I'm from Wisconsin. I think seeing myself and the idea of representation has always had such an effect on me, because if you don't see yourself in a role or on the cover of a publication or in an ad campaign or part of that brand's DNA, you think it's not possible. And I genuinely remember so many times in my childhood thinking, this is really cool, but I don't know how I would see myself ever doing this, or this is really amazing, but there's no one that looks like me or that has the same background as me, so maybe that's not a possibility for myself. And I think when we talk about inclusivity, it really is at the root of it, the representation to make people feel seen and heard, and make people feel like, oh, they may not understand, my whole entire life and everything that I'm going through, but they see me, they hear my problems, they understand who I am and what I'm looking for in life. And I think that's something that all brands can really, really pay attention to and adhere to, because it really, I think, expands your audience. It expands who you're trying to talk to. It expands who's welcome and who's invited to your brand. And I think that experience of, seeing myself has always really driven me to a place of wanting to make sure that people feel that, whether they're coming to Teen Vogue or whatever we're doing with Black in Fashion Council. Just a quick example of a way that I think is really I really easily saw the journey this year of Teen Vogue continuing to use the platform. So over the summer, obviously, after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, there were so many different protests, so many different marches this year. And a lot of them had to also do with protecting the trans community and Trans Lives Matter. And I remember very specifically, I went to a march here in Brooklyn, and it was just incredibly beautiful, and everybody was crying and wearing white. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, how can we continue this conversation? And I think that's often the question that pushes me forward with inclusivity is, how can we continue this so that it's not just a moment in time, but it really starts a movement? And I felt like at that march, that was an incredible moment, right? But it was then when it was time to choose covers and, choose who we're giving opportunities to, it was like, this is the perfect moment, because if we want to continue the conversation, this is an issue that we really care about. Let's amplify this. Let's put people on the cover that really amplify this message that's really important to us. And so on the left, you'll see Monroe Bergdorf, who's the face of L'Oreal, and she's just been an amazing activist. And on the right, you have Yari Jones, and she's a model and face of Calvin Klein, and both incredible, transgender women who are activists and doing amazing things in the spaces. And to me, it just felt like this is one in a million ways of how you continue to use your platform to speak up and to make sure that you're still applying the pressure to those issues. And so for me, it was, I think, indicative of you really, all of those choices and decisions should be ways that you are choosing of how do we amplify those moments that are really important to us and turn them into movements. So all this really, I think, also started about 2 years ago in just conversations. I wrote a piece at New York Magazine that was called Everywhere and Nowhere, What It's Like to Be Black in Fashion. And I think this year, then really seeing that it had been, 2 years later since I'd written this piece, really made me reflect a lot of why I felt like there need to be changes and what was the next step as far as making inclusivity really something that people were taking seriously, and not just, oh, for this time, or we'll make sure to do this so that we don't get called out on Twitter. And in that piece that I wrote 2 years ago, I was able to talk to over 150 different Black people in the industry that were mid-level to senior level. And they were just saying, so many incredible, I think, stories that I'd never heard of people that were still dealing with so much racism and so many microaggressions, and not feeling like they were at companies that really cared about their succession or growth. Not feeling like they were ever promoted to any position that they really deserved. And I think it was really eye-opening because it was so many senior level people that were still dealing with these issues. And it was like, if these are senior level people still dealing with this, how are all the assistants and younger people ever going to stay in this industry if they're seeing their mentors and of all these great people who've gone and risen up in the industry dealing with this as well. And so for me, it was really eye-opening. I mean, I talked to over 150 people, as I said, but every conversation was almost 2 hours because it became a therapy session of, how do I deal with this? How do I get through the workday? How do I get HR to understand all of these problems? And how do I get the company to change? And so this year, I think, I started to have a lot of conversations with a lot of people that were basically saying, it's been 2 years since this piece is out. We've shared our narratives. We've told what needed to change. We've said, what we want the industry to do. And that's really when the idea of Black in Fashion Council came about, because it really became clear that a lot of companies have the policies, right? So a lot of companies have the policies of workforce protections and what is considered appropriate behavior in the workplace. But the reality is a lot of companies aren't putting those policies into practice. So we decided with Black in Fashion Council to try to find a way that we could
rate, score, grade, give the industry really a new standard of what should be acceptable and what isn't. That led us to working with the Human Rights Campaign on a corporate equity index. They already have a corporate equity index that is specific to the LGBTQ plus community. And so we really felt like the Human Rights Campaign was the best partner, really understood diversity and equity and inclusivity on more than just a surface level. And we really felt like they were great partners in this work and making sure that companies really feel like they can rise to the occasion of changing and not like they're being shamed into it, not like they're being, put on blast in a very public way, but really, helping you hand in hand to make sure that you're making inclusivity part of every decision and part of every business decision that you're making. So that was something that we really started to do with Black in Fashion Council, and then definitely working with each company on specific initiatives. And the initiatives we basically said to companies could be the ways in which they really felt like they could rise to the occasion. We didn't want to put certain, ideas into their head that 800 things needed to change. It was honestly we want change. What are the most realistic ways that change can be implemented in your company? And how do we remove the barriers from making those things, happen? How do we remove the barriers so this isn't just conversations and that there's actually action? So one key part of the Black in Fashion Council pledges, there's one pledge where you can be part of the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equity Index. And then we've also just partnered with people on what we're calling active allyship. So companies that for different workforce protection laws, or maybe they don't want, public statistics out there about their business, but still are really committed to change. And we call it specifically active allyship because here on the screen, I think is a really good example of performative allyship. So at the top, you have images from the runway from Jacquemus, who's a fashion designer. I happen to actually really love Jacquemus, so this is an example I was not too excited to find. But then at the bottom, so you have the reality of who actually works at this company is on the right, which happens to be all white people, and all of the models are people of color. And this is a really good example of performative allyship, of you doing something that is publicly on the surface inclusive, thinking about all different kinds of people, thinking about, women of color, but actually who has stake in the company, who works at this company, who's running this company, who's on the board of this company, is clearly not inclusive. And so we really press people on active allyship. And I think active is a really good word because when we think about even racism, I think people don't understand that you can't just be, oh, well, I'm not racist because I'm not do anything to be racist. You have to be actively anti-racist. You have to actively show up to do all of this work to make sure that it's not in the fabric and thread of your business. And so I think this is just one of many examples, but I think there are so many ways in which allyship has really been performative and on the surface. And you really have to make sure that it's not just the front-facing initiatives, but also everything that you're doing behind the scenes. So this is actually when we announced Black in Fashion Council, and we were fortunate enough to get coverage from Forbes and Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and all those things. Now we have over 100 companies signed on. So we have companies like Tiffany & Co. and Cartier to, your Gap and H&M. We've been working with a lot of different brands, and every brand has really been different. We haven't approached it as, you need to do this or you need to do that. We've really tried to take every single brand relationship as a way of figuring out the things that they need. Some brands have had us come in and talk with their employee resource groups because they really don't have a good relationship with the people of color and retention at their company. Some companies have had us, moderate discussions for them and really bring about a way of new communication as far as inclusivity in the workplace. And it really has been, I think, a tailored approach because it's not just if you're a small company, there isn't a way for you to be more inclusive. Honestly, no matter the size of the company, no matter the size of the brand, there are a million ways for you to be more inclusive and to show up to do this work. Some of the key elements of when a company signed up to work with the Black in Fashion Council, for one, you sign up to work with us for the next 3 years. And that was really important to me because we want to make sure that this is something that we're talking about, not just this year because of the social and cultural reckoning, but also next year and the year after that. And if you really care about this work and if you're really committed, you're going to be doing this for a very long time. corporate culture doesn't change overnight, whether it's a really large company or a small company. And we really wanted to make sure that companies knew that this was something that they would have to be committed to long term. I think the second portion of this is really making sure that we set it up again as something that really felt like people could, even if they felt like they didn't have a ton of resources or budget or a ton of people at the company who were really excited about this, that they felt like, okay, I can get there. Like there's a lot of changes that need to be made, but this is actually attainable. And so we have with our corporate equity index, basically this. So we've signed up companies 2020, the end of 2020. Our corporate equity index will be coming out in fall of 2021, but we have given companies the option of releasing their own numbers, but we'll be releasing a report that's just cumulative generalized results. So in 2021, our report will not say, if a company says we're not ready for our information to be public, we'll just be releasing cumulative information that will just say, different things about their improvements, but not exactly specific numbers. But then in 2022, we will be releasing everyone's specific numbers, because we've really set it up that we can give you a very long runway to make all these changes, whether your budgets have changed because of the pandemic, or whether you're restructuring recruitment and hiring, or you're working on retention policies. We're really setting it up that, you don't have to release everything right away. We want to make sure that people are comfortable, but also that they are committed to this change and know that transparency is really part of this. And I think that lends itself to a lot of what we talk about with companies as far as our approach. Cancel culture has been a really big topic, I think, this year, and people feeling like they're afraid to do anything because they don't want to make the wrong step and they don't want to be called out. And we really made sure that this approach was not about cancel culture and really moved to accountability culture. I think everybody just wants companies to be accountable and transparent. So you're going to make mistakes. We all do. But holding yourself accountable to that and being transparent about it, I think helps people understand, okay, so they made a mistake, but at least they're actually owning up to it. And I also think that the issue really then comes of, if you want to be accountable and you want to bring that transparency, with that comes responsibility. And with that responsibility comes action. So I think what it really is allowing for people to understand when they work with us is, it is going to be sometimes where you're not going to get everything right, or maybe employees don't actually feel like you've done enough inside your company to actually make them feel seen and heard. But as long as you are accountable and transparent about that and are taking responsibility for those things and, actually applying some actions to that, that is actually going to allow for a better work culture, for things to actually change, and for people to actually feel like inclusivity is actually part of everyone's brand identity. I think also one of the biggest lessons I've learned at Teen Vogue has been, though, that young people especially really only want to align themselves with brands that inherently really care about the values that they also care about. So if they feel like a brand is not speaking up on social matters enough, or they feel like a brand doesn't support the same values as them, they won't like that brand on Instagram or be engaging with them on social media platforms or even buy that brand anymore. And I think a couple years ago, you could say like, oh, I would see a friend wearing a brand that's overtly done some really crazy racist thing on Instagram, and maybe they would say, well, this item is really cute, so I just bought it anyway. And I think there has been a really big cultural shift of, if I'm supporting this brand or if I'm giving our money to this brand, they really need to be aligning with my personal values. And I think with that accountability and transparency, no matter what the values of the company are, that's what people are looking for more than ever. When we talked about our corporate equity index, I think that, everybody can agree that equality is good business. Everyone knows that if you are making your workforce more equitable and you are widening your audience and your voices, that obviously means a widening of your business. But I think that a lot of these things end up being subjective, and there are certain things that can be measured and there are certain things that are really hard to measure. And I think that what we've realized is that definitely bringing diversity to the table has really made it an effort of how do we do this in different parts of the company to make sure that it's not just one program. So we've seen a lot of companies come to us and say, well, we started an internship program and we thought that was going to fix this, or we're trying to hire for all these roles this year and now we can't find people of color to fill these roles. And I think that we've just realized that it has to be not just things on paper, not just things that are, we have this policy, we have this initiative, we have this council. It has to be, how is this actually integrating and bringing everything to the table that we're doing and not just checking each box. So one of the big things that we talk about is how do you make this holistically part of your business plan? So for one, we talk a lot about your workforce protections and policies, which we start with. I think this is comes to life in a lot of ways, but really is making sure that any company that we're working with, Black in Fashion Council, we have a resource list of vetted people that are trained to talk about unconscious bias and to talk about racism and sexism in the workplace, and how do we, normalize all these conversations. We definitely spend a lot of time with companies talking about implementing employee engagement surveys that are anonymous and climate surveys to actually see how people feel, because a lot of times what we've seen is there's such a big disconnect with how executives feel versus how people may feel that work in your store or lower level employees, and finding that connection and finding that communication stream of, okay, well, this is what top level people feel like is going on, but this is what people actually on the ground feel and know what is going on, and finding a common ground in that, I think, has been a really huge reckoning for a lot of the companies and a huge realization of what needs to change and why things haven't changed. We've definitely, encouraged just a rigorous approach to education in the workplace. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions of what is appropriate and what are different microaggressions and what is okay to say and what is not okay to say. And so we've encouraged a lot of different education practices, and any company part of the Black in Fashion Council, we regularly do what we've been calling Zoom town halls with different DEI experts. So this past week, we had a town hall that was specific to design and development positions. And so specifically Black designers who want to work at corporate companies and not start their own line, and really how they've struggled to find community and find, retention at different brands. And really, I think just letting companies hear all the different issues that come to light when you are a person of color in the industry. We also talk a lot about outreach and engagement in the corporate equity index. So employee resource groups is just a fundamental thing that everybody should have. Even if you have a really small company, there just should be a place for people of color to have that community and have a safe space to discuss different issues and problems. We want to make sure that people are actually, aggressively going about recruitment in a different way. We've seen so many companies this year say, we're going to hire for all these positions. We definitely want to partner with you and find a way we can fill people of color in these roles. But I think that people have been thinking about recruitment in a very traditional way of, well, we put the job on LinkedIn, that's all we're supposed to do. And it's not ever that simple. And I also think if you want those communities to feel welcome at your company, you have to go to where those communities are. And we've actually heard from a lot of different people of color that they actually find LinkedIn to be a hindrance, because obviously you can look up the person and you can see their ethnicity and their race by looking them up online. And so it is actually, coming at it from a way of, okay, let's make sure that we're going to different media conferences like ColorCom or NABJ for Black journalists, or we're going to Essence Fest, or we're going to different places to make sure that people of color, and specifically Black people, know that we really care about this community and we really are looking for them to find a home in our brand. We also talk about, just any supplier diversity program, anything that you're farming out as far as freelance or production or for events, any philanthropic support that you provide, all of those things should be considered as far as how can we make sure that marginalized communities are knowing that this is really important to us and knowing that inclusivity is really important to us. We also talk about front-facing versus, who's representing the company a lot in this. So that includes obviously your executives and board members, but making sure that there's actually efforts to make sure that when we talk about, talent and promotion and succession and growth at companies, that there's actually metrics, there's actually a program set into place so that you can actually analyze okay, so here's how many executives we have. Here's how we've actually been able to promote more people of color. Here's how we've actually been able to measure success against these roles. And I think policies and actions to address not only equal pay for equal work, but median pay gap. So who's holding that, opportunity and who has these high pay positions. And then as well at the bottom is just, front facing initiatives, which every company has, whether you work in media and it's magazines or it's branded content or it's ads or it's commercials, whatever it is, making sure that that really is inclusive of voice and also inclusive of who's making those decisions and who's making that content, as well as marketing and advertising to Black consumers. And I think that is really, how you spend your dollars and how you're making sure that people of color are really tapping into your brand. One of the big things that Black in Fashion Council has taken on as our own initiative that any company that signs up to work with us for the next 3 years is really a lot of our pipeline initiatives. So when you see companies now in 2020 complaining about we don't have enough people of color to apply for these roles, a lot of what we were thinking about was, okay, but how do we fix this actually from the beginning? And I think about someone like myself being from Wisconsin, there was no one around me who had a fashion background, who worked in fashion. There was no one who really gave me advice. I honestly just, really stumbled into it. And so the first start of this is our virtual job fair that I'm really excited about because we've been able to get in contact with so many different communities that are serving, kids from underprivileged backgrounds, kids who've aged out of the foster care system and are really interested in creative roles, different communities that are just, really helping young people of color to make sure that they are exposed to things. And so part of our virtual job fair is that we will be tapping into these communities and letting them know of, here companies that really, really care about inclusivity, that are really making sure that it is a hospitable place for people of color, but also here are really cool roles at these companies. Here are really cool jobs that you could have one day so that they have the time to actually get the right internship and get the right apprenticeship and get the right assistant job so that they can actually be able to apply for all these jobs one day. And I think that exposure earlier on is really just the most valuable thing that we could give these young kids, because a lot of kids don't really know about all of these different corporate jobs unless they, are part of a pre-college program or unless they have a really privileged background and are able to be exposed to these things. And so we want to also make sure that we're, allowing companies, all different executives from the companies that are signed on to the Black in Fashion Council, they would also be part of the job fair and coming to talk to the young kids and letting them know of how how they get all this amazing work done and how they've gotten to this place in their life. And so I see it as really amazing thing that we could, offer to young kids to actually change that pipeline eventually so that they can get all the exposure, all the experience they need to be eligible to apply for these jobs one day. The second thing we talk about with the pipeline, I think is also, not only just any pre-college programs or college students and making sure that we're getting them on board and understanding the ways in which they can be at these companies and the ways in which they can show up in industries. But I think also we wanted to figure out any kind of work that we could do as far as getting the word out. So we started our own job board as well. And the job board is on our site. It's been super successful. We've been doing a lot of partnerships with brands who've had programs or different initiatives and were never able to get people of color to sign up or to apply. We just did a partnership with the brand and they had this longstanding incubator program. 85% of the applicants this year were people of color because they partnered with us. And we really want to make sure that people of color are hearing about these opportunities and hearing about these jobs. And so we've worked with a ton of companies on our job board. And then we're also really excited about our vetted directory that'll be coming out next year as well. It's really important, I think, with a lot of the creative opportunities, whether it be something in production or a stylist or makeup artist or hair artist, all of those things. Those are jobs that you never really see online, right? Even like a creative director typically isn't, a job that you see online because it's usually a word of mouth kind of role that's filled. And it's important for us to actually give companies better resources as far as finding different people to hire for those roles that usually end up in a nepotism circle of my friend or my brother's friend or that kind of thing. And so that vetted directory will actually have it readily available to all the companies that sign up to the Black in Fashion Council to be able to say, okay, we need to hire production team for this next commercial that we're doing. You can go click on, it'll be more like a portal, and you can click on each kind of role and each person that you're interested in, see their portfolio, and readily contact them. And that's a lot of, just I think a simple explanation, but a lot of the work that we're trying to do in actually changing the pipeline. I know I've been throwing a lot of different ideas at you that we're working on with the Black in Fashion Council, but I did want to close out by sharing a lot of best practices that we've learned throughout this process in the past 6 months, and things that I've come to see that are really important to making sure that inclusivity is part of everything that you're doing in a company. One of the first things that we talk about with companies is BIPOC employees feeling this cultural taxation going on, which is what we see as really a forcing of people of color in the workplace, doing a lot of this work for free, adding a lot of this work to their already, salaried workload, and feeling like it should be just part of a company initiative. And so we really stress for all these companies, make sure that this is something that you're putting in your budget, that actually has resources, that you're not just expecting all of your people of color employees to change and to fix on their own, but really is part of the executive leadership team, your business plan, all of those things. I think this also creates a system that ensures the leadership team is not only hearing, but acting upon things that people are talking about. There's been a lot of time, I think, spent this year talking about diversity, talking about inclusivity. It really is, at the end of the day, about action. And that's what I was saying before about accountability, transparency, responsibility, but moving to that action part is incredibly, incredibly important. There's been so many BIPOC employees that we've talked to from companies who said, we've been talking about this for years, and now we're talking about it even more this year, but we, at the end of the day, just want to see action. And I think making sure that that executive team understands what employees really want and how they want change to really be amplified in the workplace is incredibly important, even more so now than ever. We also really have been encouraging a lot of people to set metrics against recruiters. And some of you may be familiar with the Rooney Rule that the NFL uses. So if you have a position, an executive role position, and you have top 3 candidates for that, at least one needs to be an underrepresented minority and one needs to be a woman. But we've actually just encouraged companies to find different metrics that, applies to them. If it's not the Rooney Rule, what is it that you're actually finding and how you're finding talent, whether it's internal or external recruiters, there needs to be considerations. And so we go through of all the candidates that were given job offers, what percentage were diverse? Of all hires, what percentage are diverse? What's the turnover rate of diversity hires? And really looking at your recruiting process and actually setting metrics against that, I think changes the game as far as moving the needle on things. We've also really encouraged people to look into blind hiring, a lot more anonymous climate surveys and different technology that allows you to hide demographics from applications, but also from feedback from different people at the company. So even when, people have been, putting jobs on our job board, we've said to companies, let's actually talk through the must-haves and the language of this job description, right? So is it a must-have for this person to have a PhD, or would you hire someone even if they didn't and they just had great experience? And I think going through all of those sequences that could be a little bit of implicit bias, that could be a little bit of nepotism, that could be a little bit of a microaggression at every step, I think has allowed companies to understand that there needs to be more space for blind hiring through, resumes that don't have their race and ethnicity pictures involved, but also making sure that you're, doing more climate surveys that are really talking to employees to make sure that they are feeling that seen and heard and voices amplified in the workplace. So one of the things that I really want to see companies start to do more of is creating a talent network that isn't tied to a specific job. I think this is really important because as people are heavily recruiting, you also have to understand that you have to make the workforce a hospitable place for people of color employees, but also really go about it in a way that is tapping into your employee resource group and tapping into your diversity councils to make sure that there is actually community there, right? So we've done a ton of different virtual events with companies to actually actually, let's just kind of have a job fair just specifically for your company, and everybody part of your employee resource group, they bring a friend that may one day want to work at the company. And it gives people actually a chance, even if it's virtually, it gives people a chance to actually get to know what is the company culture like? Who are these people? What is the human resources situation like? And actually give that sense of community around, here's actual value that we're bringing. We actually are establishing a company that you would be really interested in. And I think just creating more of a relationship. So even if it isn't a specific job that they're applying to, they can actually, like dating, see what they're getting into, and you can see the different options that are out there, for you to be recruiting from. And so we've seen really great success in that, of just creating that talent network that isn't tied to something specific, because there actually is a lot more support and community involved in that. And it isn't just HR, we're hiring, we want to talk to this person kind of recruiting style. And I think going about it in a less traditional way, it's a lot less pressure, but also I think just allows for there to be more conversation about what roles could be good for somebody. And maybe there isn't a specific role for that person right now, but maybe you meet them and you realize, this person just understands our brand and this person really gets it. And maybe this is someone that we bring into the fold one day. And I think but the last point is really, you have to commit to fighting explicit bias. You have to commit to making sure that there is a form of, new company procedures, trainings constantly for everyone in the company, whether it's executives or new people coming in, that there is actual training around addressing unacceptable behaviors, whether that's discriminatory language, sexual harassment, and having a no tolerance policy. I think definitely makes people understand that here's the company culture that we're creating, and here's how we're making inclusivity part of our brand. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Okay, time for questions. My first question is, what organizations do you partner with in order to develop a pipeline for diverse talent? Honestly, the organizations that we work with are all very different companies, from, Glossier and Cartier to Gap, H&M, Everlane, Reformation, very long list. And we're, still adding companies on, and we're super excited about the work that we're doing. But as far as actual DEI initiatives, working with the Human Rights Campaign has been incredible, because they are well versed in the ways that diversity and inclusion and equity should be really part of everything that you're doing. We've been really fortunate enough to have an amazing advisory board. So on our advisory board, we have people like Esne, who used to run global D&I for H&M, and now she's at Wonders & Thompson. We have Beth Ann Hardison. So if you look up Beth Ann Hardison, she is the original gangsta of all Black models in the world. She's the most incredible. We have Samira Nasser, who's the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar. Tracy Reese, one of the most prolific Black female designers that's ever walked this planet. We've just been super grateful to have the blessing and a lot of people really helping us as far as, okay, what actually needs to change? Because I think the big thing has been, here are all the problems, and everyone can vent about the problems, but actually moving that to action and implementing best practices has been really, I think, the biggest change that we're seeing. And we've just been really fortunate to have a lot of partners in that. So my second question is, what are some systematic changes that are crucial for a company to address? I think systematic changes really are the things that fundamentally, would a person of color want to stay at this company or not? Because I think that a lot of companies have seen this year, people are looking for jobs. We're in the middle of a pandemic. You can find people to hire, but will they stay? Will they grow at this company? Will they feel like they're part of this community and family of this company, and really feel like there is actual succession and growth? Is a whole other bag of problems. And I think that systematic changes have to be things that really are not necessarily, changes that, need to be implemented right now, but really of like, what is actually changing the culture of this company, and how can we make this a place that people actually feel is equitable, no matter your race, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, all of those things. And so for me, it really comes down to, if you have all these policies put into place, how are people actually feeling about them? How are they actually feeling like they can show up to their full selves? Do people feel like they have to code switch to be around certain people in meetings? Do people feel like they have to, present themselves a certain way that they wouldn't feel normally comfortable just to fit in the company? Do people feel like, certain behavior and microaggressions of, touching other people's hair or making comments that they think are really funny but actually offensive? Do they feel like it's an okay environment to have that kind of behavior? And I think, really being accountable for that is the issue in a lot of ways, because we've seen so many companies say, we can't implement really a no tolerance policy for a lot of different things, because it does foster, I think, a nature of people not wanting to talk about issues or not wanting to go to HR. But there does have to be systems put into place of, here's what is acceptable in the workplace and here's what isn't. And here's how we really want to represent our brand. And everyone who works at this brand is a representative of the brand. And so if you are not aligning with the values of inclusivity, then maybe this isn't the company for you. And that's the hard conversation that we've had to have with a lot of companies. So my third question is, it is important to take responsibility for your mistakes and missteps. Do you have examples of fashion brands that have done this well? Yeah, I think a lot of brands that we've been able to work with have really realized, okay, so here's what we have to offer and here's why we haven't been showing up and what we actually need to change in this. We have a partnership with IMG, which produces all of the fashion shows for, all of the brands. And it was really amazing this past September to work with IMG, because they have this huge platform of, different spaces for designers to show. And they can grant access to a lot of different conversations for designers as far as trying to get funding and money to be able to actually, excel their brand and grow their brand. And they also, just have a lot of different, I think, opportunities for designers to be put on a platform to make sure that people are aware of their brand and, hopefully increase their sales. And so we were able to partner with them this past September on, providing a showroom space for Black designers that just needed a space to actually meet professionally with brands and talk with people, so that they wouldn't have to show people, their brand in their apartment, which feels a little bit less professional, and they want to be taken seriously as designers. And so they were given a showroom, they were given, space to make social content, they were given assets for social to be able to obviously amplify their presence on social media. We did a panel with all the different designers, and we really, took that as a really great start, I think, to just give designers what they really needed. And instead of just, we can find a program to give them a little money, what they really needed was mentorship and support, and to be part of conversations, in fashion, and to really be put on a platform. And so I felt like that was a really good example of success that we've had of actually changing a designer's trajectory and the course of their life. And that's something that I'm really proud of. So my fourth question is, what are some actionable steps for smaller brands and retailers who may not have a DEI budget? This is a loaded question for me, because anything that is important to a brand needs to be in your budget. And I understand, pandemic has caused people's brands, budgets to change. I understand that people have had to lay people off. I understand all these things. But I will say, inherently, if anything is important to you, it's part of your budget. That's true for me as a person. That's true for any company, right? So I do think aligning your values as far as how you are spending your money is always a conversation. And I'm not saying it has to be a large 6-figure number, but I do think that there needs to be budget behind things if you really care about them. But we have had the conversation with a lot of companies who they've had to downsize. They don't have a ton of budget as of right now. They're trying to figure it out for 2021. Even so, the conversations that we've had with them are, how can you show up for your people of color employees and make sure that even if you're not doing some type of cool, community event virtually, and even if you're not able to, really put money behind, giving equitable pay or whatever it is right now, I think it is taking that time to actually interface with all of your people of color employees. At Teen Vogue, I have a ton of employees, but I honestly and very truly do pick up the phone and call everyone individually to do a check-in with them and to see how they're doing and see how they're feeling. And even if they don't necessarily have a ton to say, or even if they're not in the mood to share, I think making that sense of, let's interact, even if it is virtually, let's make sure that we're in communication. Let's make sure that this is a community that feels like I can speak up if I have something to say, that executives really care, I think is something that is free and readily able to do. And I think having those conversations and giving, I think, even just giving more thought around, how do we make community as part of something that we want to have these conversations. We regularly share a lot of different, just like, these are great articles that we're reading about changes in the industry, or this is an interesting take on how we could change company culture, and having that as a conversation. I think these are all things of like, how do we make this equitable for our company? And I think, a lot of these things don't cost money. It only just takes time. Okay, question 5. Why do you think brands struggle to get started with DEI, and any advice you would give them? I think I've given a ton of advice, but I will say I think brands really struggle because it's a lot to do. It's a lot of work. But that's also, what it's like, being a Black executive. I think that's what it's like, being a person of color. You have to deal with a lot of things in the workplace that you don't necessarily want to deal with. And I think that we all, again, we have to be committed to this work, and we have to be actively anti-racist and actively anti all these things that are really hindering the workplace from being hospitable for all different kinds of people. And I just think that a lot of times it can feel really overwhelming, and it can feel like, well, I thought we were doing that one thing and I thought that was helping. But I think that's why, in partnering with the Black in Fashion Council, we've made it very clear to companies that, the corporate equity index is a way to kind of see the standard that we're trying to set, in a new industry level standard of what is appropriate and what you should be thinking about. But also in talking with each company and working on those specific initiatives, we've really just said, what do you really want to focus on? What do you really feel like you can put your efforts to? What do you really feel like, here's an area that we can change, and if we just implement some things that, we really can focus on, we know that this can actually move the needle. And I think a lot of times it can feel very like I met with one company and they were like, we have 44 goals. And it's like, realistically, are you going to meet all these goals? No. But I think it is figuring out what are those top 3 things. And that's a conversation that we have with most companies of what are the top 3 things. If it's, we want to start an internship program, we want to start a mentorship program currently at our company, we want to start a feedback system, we want to start working on our talent network. Like, these are things that you can implement into your strategy plans for 2021 right now. And it doesn't have to be 8 things. It could just be 3 things. But those 3 things, if you're really, pushing the needle on those things, you will actually see change. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to hear me talk on and on about inclusivity. Obviously, something I'm incredibly passionate about, and I'm really hopeful that you are too. I really believe that inclusivity is possible at every company, no matter how small or big. I really believe in the work that we're doing in the Black in Fashion Council. Please, reach out to me if you have any questions, concerns. I'd be happy to walk you through our corporate equity index that's coming out in 2021. And thank you all so much, and look forward to seeing you again.
So this year, I thought, why not get into shipbuilding instead of getting an icon pass? I just find shipbuilding so relaxing. Definitely don't regret not getting an icon pass. Shipbuilding's way better.